The blue dot stopped moving at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that changed everything. I'm Drake Torrin, 38 years old, safety officer at Cleveland Steelworks, and until that moment, I thought I knew my wife. The Find My Friends app glowed on my phone screen, showing Calla's location frozen at the Sunset Motel off Interstate 90, 200 miles from her supposed girls' retreat in Columbus. My thumb hovered over the screenshot button. One tap would preserve this moment forever. One tap would confirm what my gut had been whispering for months. I took the screenshot. Then I closed the app and set my phone face down on my desk at the mill. The machinery hummed around me, steel grinding against steel, but all I could hear was the sound of my world cracking apart like cheap metal under pressure. "You look like someone ran over your dog," Pete Kowalski said, dropping into the chair across from my desk. Pete's been my union rep and closest friend for 15 years. He knows me better than anyone, including my wife. "Just tired," I replied, forcing my voice to stay level. "Long shift." Pete studied my face with those sharp gray eyes that had negotiated 100 labor disputes. "Drake, you've been off for weeks. What's going on?" I wanted to tell him. I wanted to show him the screenshot, to have someone else confirm that yes, my wife of 16 years was lying to me. Instead, I shrugged and turned back to my computer screen. Nothing I can't handle. Pete didn't buy it, but he knew when to push and when to back off. That's what made him good at his job. He stood up, patted my shoulder, and headed back to the floor. My phone buzzed. A text from Calla. "Having such a great time. Yoga was amazing. About to grab dinner with the girls. Love you." The message came with 3 photos. Yoga mats arranged in a circle, wine glasses on a restaurant table, and a group shot of 5 women I'd never seen before. The timestamp showed 4:15 p.m., but the lighting in the photos looked wrong. Too bright for late afternoon, too staged for candid shots. I typed back, "Sounds wonderful. Have fun." Then I opened our shared Google Calendar. Calla had blocked out this weekend as Girls Retreat Columbus 3 weeks ago. But scrolling back through the months, I found something that made my chest tighten. Similar blocks, always on weekends, always labeled off-site or team building or conference. The duration was always the same, Friday evening through Sunday afternoon. I cross-referenced these dates with my work schedule. Every single time, I'd been pulling overtime or working weekend shifts. Convenient. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a notification from our shared banking app. Someone had used our joint credit card at a gas station, not in Columbus where the retreat was happening, but 30 miles from the Sunset Motel. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling tiles. For months, I'd been telling myself I was paranoid. Calla had been distant, sure. She'd been working late more often, taking more business trips, spending more time on her phone, but she was climbing the corporate ladder at Meridian Insurance, and I'd convinced myself that her behavior was just career ambition. Now I knew better. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was realizing how long I'd been lying to myself. The signs had been there for months, maybe longer. The way she'd started dressing differently, buying expensive lingerie that I never saw her wear. The way she'd become protective of her phone, taking it to the bathroom, sleeping with it under her pillow. The way she'd stopped asking about my day or sharing details about hers. I'd noticed it all and explained it all away because I didn't want to see the truth. My computer chimed with an email notification. It was from our insurance company, a policy change confirmation. I opened it with shaking hands. Calla had changed the beneficiary on her life insurance policy that morning. My name had been removed and replaced with someone else's. Trey Gannon. I knew that name. Trey was Calla's boss, the regional director who'd hired her 2 years ago. I'd met him once at a company Christmas party. Tall, confident, the kind of guy who wore expensive suits and drove a leased BMW. The kind of guy who made me feel like exactly what I was. A blue-collar worker in a cheap suit, trying to make conversation about things I didn't understand. Now I understood plenty. I Googled Trey Gannon and found his LinkedIn profile, his Facebook page, his Instagram account. The Instagram was particularly interesting. Lots of photos from business trips, fancy restaurants, hotel rooms with king-sized beds, and in several recent photos, there was a shadow in the mirror, a reflection of someone taking the picture. Someone with long, dark hair like my wife's. My phone rang. Calla's name appeared on the screen. "Hi, honey," I answered, proud of how normal my voice sounded. "Drake, I'm having such a wonderful time. The retreat center is beautiful, and the other women are so inspiring. I'm learning so much about mindfulness and self-care." "That's great," I said. "Where exactly are you staying again?" A pause. Just a heartbeat, but I caught it. "The Serenity Springs Retreat Center. I think I mentioned it before." She hadn't mentioned it before. In fact, she'd been vague about all the details of this trip. Right, I said. Well, I'm glad you're having fun. I miss you. Miss you too. I should go. We're about to start our evening meditation session. I'll call you tomorrow, okay? Okay, love you. Love you too. She hung up, and I immediately opened the Find My Friends app. The blue dot was still at the Sunset Motel. I sat there for a long time, staring at that dot. Part of me wanted to drive there right now, to confront her, to demand answers. But I'd spent enough years in safety management to know that the worst accidents happen when people make impulsive decisions under emotional stress. So instead, I made a different decision, a calm one. I was going to find out everything, every lie, every deception, every moment of betrayal, and then I was going to decide what to do about it. But first, I needed help. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in 3 years. Instead of going to the mill, I drove to a small office building downtown and climbed 2 flights of stairs to a door marked V. Martinez, Private Investigations. Valerie Martinez looked like she'd stepped out of an old detective movie, sharp suit, sharper eyes, and the kind of confidence that comes from seeing every type of human betrayal imaginable. She'd been recommended by a guy at the mill whose ex-wife had tried to hide assets during their separation. Let me guess, she said before I'd even sat down. Cheating spouse. Is it that obvious? 30% of my business. The other 70% is insurance fraud, missing persons, and corporate espionage. You don't look like the corporate type, so cheating spouse it is. She leaned back in her chair. Tell me what you know. I showed her the screenshots, the calendar patterns, the insurance change, the credit card charges. She listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. How long have you been married? She asked when I finished. 16 years. We have a daughter, Riley. She's 14. And when did you first suspect something was wrong? I thought about it. Maybe 6 months ago. Little things at first. She started working late more often, taking more business trips. She bought new clothes, changed her hair. I told myself it was just her job. She got promoted last year, and she's been trying to impress her boss. Trey Gannon. Right. Val made another note. Mr. Torrin, I'm going to be straight with you. Based on what you've shown me, your wife is almost certainly having an affair. The question is whether you want me to confirm it or if you want to handle this yourself. What do you mean? Some people just need to know for sure before they make their next move. Others want detailed documentation for legal purposes. And some want to gather enough evidence to ensure they have the upper hand in whatever comes next. I considered this. What would you recommend? Depends on your goals. Are you planning to file for separation? Try to work things out? Or do you want to make sure she can't screw you over when this all comes to light? The question hit me harder than I'd expected. What did I want? A week ago, I would have said I wanted to save my marriage. Now, looking at the evidence spread across Val's desk, I realized that the marriage I thought I'd been trying to save probably hadn't existed for months. I want to know everything, I said. Every detail, every lie. I want to be prepared for whatever she throws at me. Val nodded approvingly. Smart man. My rate is $200 a day plus expenses. I'll need $1,000 up front. I wrote the check. I'll start with the basics, she said. Confirm the affair, identify patterns, document everything. But Mr. Torrin, you need to promise me something. What? Whatever I find, whatever evidence I gather, you don't do anything stupid with it. No confrontations, no dramatic scenes, no showing up at hotel rooms with a camera. You let me do my job, and then you make smart, calculated decisions about your next steps. I promise. She smiled for the first time since I'd walked in. Good. I'll be in touch. I drove home to an empty house. Riley was at school, and Calla wouldn't be back until Sunday evening. I had the whole weekend to think, to plan, to prepare for whatever came next. I started by searching through Calla's home office. She kept most of her important documents in a filing cabinet that she thought was locked. It wasn't. The lock had been broken for years, though she'd never bothered to fix it or mention it to me. Inside, I found credit card statements I'd never seen before. A personal card in her name only, with charges dating back 8 months. Expensive restaurants, hotel rooms, clothing stores, jewelry purchases. The total was staggering, nearly $15,000 in charges I knew nothing about. I also found printed emails between Calla and someone identified only as TG. The emails were carefully worded, professional on the surface, but the subtext was clear. They were planning trips together, coordinating schedules, making excuses for their absences. One email from 3 weeks ago made my hands shake. Can't wait for our weekend getaway. I've told Dee about the girls' retreat. He's working overtime anyway, so he won't miss me. This could be our chance to finally make some real decisions about the future. Real decisions about the future. What kind of decisions? I kept searching and found something that made my chest tighten, a consultation appointment with a family law attorney scheduled for next week. The appointment was marked confidential and re-asset protection and custody arrangements. She was planning to leave me. Not only that, she was planning to make sure she got the better end of the deal when she did. My phone buzzed with a text from Riley. "Dad, can you pick me up from soccer practice? Mom's car isn't here." I realized I'd been sitting in Calla's office for 3 hours, surrounded by evidence of her betrayal. I quickly put everything back where I'd found it and drove to Riley's school. Riley climbed into the passenger seat, her soccer uniform muddy and her face flushed from practice. She looked so much like Calla at that age. Dark hair, bright eyes, that determined expression she got when she was focused on something. "How was practice?" I asked. "Good. Coach says I might make varsity next year." She buckled her seatbelt and studied my face. "Dad, are you okay? You look weird." "Just tired, kiddo. Long week at work." "Where's Mom? I thought she was coming back today." "Tomorrow," I said. Her retreat got extended. Riley nodded, but I could see questions in her eyes. She was smart, observant, probably picking up on the same tension I'd been ignoring for months. "Dad," she said as we pulled into our driveway, "are you and Mom okay?" The question caught me off guard. I wanted to lie, to protect her, to maintain the illusion of family stability for as long as possible. But Riley deserved better than lies. "We're going through a rough patch," I said carefully. "But whatever happens, it's not your fault, and we both love you very much." She nodded solemnly, like she'd been expecting this answer. "Okay, I love you too, Dad." That evening, I sat in my garage with a beer and my phone, staring at the Find My Friends app. Calla's dot had moved from the motel to a restaurant, then to what looked like a shopping center, then back to the motel. A perfect weekend getaway with her lover, funded by credit cards I didn't know existed and justified by lies I'd been too trusting to question. My phone rang. Val Martinez. "I've got preliminary confirmation," she said without preamble. "Your wife and Trey Gannon checked into the Sunset Motel on Friday evening under his name. They've been there all weekend. I've got photos, credit card receipts, and witness statements from hotel staff." "Okay," I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. "There's more. I ran a background check on Gannon. He's married, wife's name is Madison. They've got 2 kids. And get this, he's got serious financial problems. Gambling debts, maxed out credit cards, behind on his mortgage. Your wife's insurance policy change makes a lot more sense now." The pieces clicked into place. Trey wasn't just having an affair with my wife. He was using her. The expensive gifts, the hotel rooms, probably even some of those credit card charges were being funded by Calla's money. And now he was positioning himself to benefit from her life insurance. "Mr. Torrin, there's something else you should know. I did some digging into your wife's recent activities, and I found something troubling. She's been researching how to have someone declared mentally incompetent." My beer bottle slipped from my hand and shattered on the concrete floor. "What do you mean?" "Internet searches on her work computer, which I was able to access through a contact at her company. Searches for terms like paranoid behavior, emotional instability, involuntary commitment procedures. She's been building a case that you're having some kind of breakdown." I thought about the past few months, how Calla had been encouraging me to see a therapist, suggesting I was working too much, commenting on my mood swings and paranoid thoughts. Whenever I questioned her behavior, she hadn't just been having an affair. She'd been gaslighting me, setting me up, preparing to have me declared unfit so she could take everything. Our house, our savings, custody of Riley. "What do I do?" I asked. "You get smart," Val said. "You document everything, you protect yourself legally, and you make sure that when this comes to light, you're the one holding all the cards." "How?" "Leave that to me. But Mr. Torrin, this is bigger than just an affair. Your wife and her boyfriend are planning to destroy you. We need to make sure that doesn't happen." After she hung up, I sat in the garage for a long time, surrounded by the smell of spilled beer and the weight of terrible knowledge. My marriage was over. Had been over for months, probably. But this wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was war. Sunday evening, Calla came home glowing. She swept into the house with her yoga mat under one arm and a canvas tote bag full of retreat materials, chattering about meditation sessions and life-changing conversations with women whose names I'd never heard before. "You look great," I said, and meant it. She did look great, relaxed, confident, radiant in the way people look when they're getting exactly what they want. "I feel amazing," she said, kissing my cheek. "This retreat was exactly what I needed. I feel like I've got such clarity about my priorities now." Riley emerged from her room to hug her mother. "How was it, Mom?" "Wonderful, sweetheart. I learned so much about self-care and setting boundaries and making sure you're not letting other people's needs overshadow your own authentic self. I nodded and smiled and asked appropriate questions about the retreat center and the other participants. Calla answered with the kind of detailed enthusiasm that comes from careful preparation. She'd clearly spent time crafting this story, making sure all the pieces fit together, but she made one mistake. When she described the final meditation session, she mentioned watching the sunset over the lake. The problem was that the Serenity Springs Retreat Center she claimed to have attended was located on the east side of a lake, according to their website. The sunset would have been behind the building, not over the water. It was a small detail, the kind of thing most people would never notice. But I'd spent years investigating workplace accidents, and I'd learned that the truth lives in the details. After Riley went to bed, Calla and I sat on the couch watching television. She curled up against me like she used to in the early years of our marriage, and for a moment, I almost forgot about the screenshots and the credit card statements and the insurance policy changes. Almost. "Drake," she said during a commercial break, "I've been thinking about us." "Here it comes," I thought. "I feel like we've been drifting apart lately. You've been so stressed about work, and I've been focused on my career, and we haven't been connecting the way we used to." "I've noticed that too," I said carefully. "I think we should consider counseling. Maybe individual therapy for both of us to work on our own issues, and then couples therapy to rebuild our relationship." The concern in her voice sounded genuine. If I hadn't known what I knew, I might have been touched by it. Instead, I recognized it for what it was. The next phase of her plan to have me declared mentally unstable. "That's a good idea," I said. "Do you have anyone in mind?" "Actually, I've already done some research. There's a therapist named Dr. Patricia Henley who specializes in anxiety and paranoid thinking. I think she could really help you work through some of the issues you've been having." Paranoid thinking. There it was. "What kind of issues?" I asked. Calla sat up and took my hands in hers. "Honey, you've been different lately. More suspicious, more worried about things that probably aren't real problems. Like last month when you were convinced that someone had been in the house while we were gone, or when you thought I was lying about that conference in Detroit." I remembered both incidents. The first had happened when I'd come home to find things slightly out of place in our bedroom. Drawers not quite closed, books moved on the nightstand. I'd mentioned it to Calla, and she'd suggested that maybe I was imagining things. The second incident had occurred when Calla claimed to be at a conference in Detroit, but I'd seen her car parked at a restaurant across town. When I'd asked her about it, she'd insisted I must have been mistaken, that it must have been a similar car. Now I understood. She'd been staging these incidents, creating situations where my reasonable suspicions would look like paranoid delusions. "You're right," I said. "I have been feeling more anxious lately. Maybe therapy would help?" She smiled and squeezed my hands. "I'm so glad you're open to it. I'll call Dr. Henley tomorrow and set up an appointment for you." That night, I lay awake listening to Calla's breathing and planning my next move. She was good, better than I'd given her credit for. She'd been playing this game for months, maybe longer, setting up her pieces, preparing for the endgame. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. Monday morning, I called Val Martinez. "I need to accelerate our timeline," I told her. "She's trying to have me declared mentally incompetent. She's already got a therapist picked out and a story about my paranoid behavior." "I was afraid of this," Val said. "But don't worry. I've been busy this weekend, too. I've got enough evidence to prove the affair, and I've documented her financial activities. More importantly, I found something that's going to change the game entirely." "What?" "Trey Gannon isn't just cheating on his wife and using your wife for money. He's also embezzling from their company. I've got records showing unauthorized transfers from client accounts, falsified expense reports, and kickbacks from vendors. Your wife might not know about it, but she's been helping him by providing access to company systems and signing off on transactions she doesn't understand." My mind raced. "So she's an accessory to embezzlement?" "Potentially. But here's the thing. I don't think she knows. I think Gannon has been using her the same way he's using everyone else, which means she's as much a victim as a perpetrator." This complicated things. Part of me had been looking forward to watching Calla face the consequences of her choices, but if she was being manipulated by Trey, if she was as much a victim as I was, then maybe there was still a chance to save something from this wreckage. "What do you recommend?" I asked. "We give her a chance to make the right choice. We present her with the evidence, show her what Trey really is, and see if she's willing to walk away from him and work on rebuilding what she's broken. And if she's not, then we make sure she faces the full consequences of her decisions." That afternoon, I drove to Calla's office building. I'd never visited her at work before. She'd always said it wasn't necessary, that her colleagues wouldn't be interested in meeting me. Now I understood why. The Meridian Insurance building was all glass and steel, the kind of place that made my steel mill feel like a relic from another century. I took the elevator to the 7th floor and asked the receptionist for Calla Torrin. "I'm sorry, but Mrs. Torrin is in a meeting with Mr. Gannon," the receptionist said. "Can I take a message?" "I'll wait," I said, settling into a chair in the lobby. 20 minutes later, Calla emerged from a conference room with Trey Gannon. They were walking close together, their heads bent in intimate conversation, and Calla was laughing at something he'd said. She looked up and saw me. The color drained from her face. "Drake, what are you doing here?" "I was in the neighborhood," I said, standing up. "Thought I'd surprise you." Trey stepped forward with a politician's smile and an extended hand. "You must be Drake. I'm Trey Gannon, Calla's supervisor. She talks about you all the time." I shook his hand and looked him in the eye. He was exactly what I'd expected. Handsome, confident, wearing a suit that cost more than I made in a week. But there was something else there too, something I recognized from my years of investigating workplace accidents. The look of someone who knew he was in trouble. "Nice to meet you," I said. "Calla's told me a lot about you too." We stood there for a moment, 3 people who all knew more than they were saying. Then Calla broke the tension. "Trey, would you excuse us? I think I'm going to leave early today." "Of course," he said. "We can finish our discussion tomorrow." As we walked to the elevator, I could feel him watching us. When the doors closed, Calla turned to me with a forced smile. "This is such a nice surprise," she said. "But you should have called first. I might have been busy." "You were busy," I said. "Important meeting?" "Just work stuff, budget reviews, client assessments, boring administrative things." The elevator reached the ground floor, and we walked to the parking garage in silence. When we reached our cars, Calla turned to me with a concerned expression. "Drake, is everything okay? You seem tense?" "I'm fine," I said. "Just wanted to see where my wife spends her days." She studied my face for a long moment, and I could see her trying to read my expression, trying to figure out what I knew or suspected. "Well, now you've seen it," she said finally. "Should we go home? I can start dinner." "Sure," I said. "I'll follow you." As I drove behind her car through the city streets, I made a decision. Tomorrow, I would give Calla the chance to come clean, to walk away from Trey and work on rebuilding our marriage. I would show her the evidence of his embezzlement, prove to her that he was using her, and hope that she would choose our family over whatever fantasy he'd sold her. But if she chose him, if she continued the lies and the manipulation and the plan to have me declared incompetent, then I would make sure she faced the full consequences of that choice. The game was almost over. It was time to see who was really playing to win. Tuesday morning, I took another sick day. This was becoming a habit, but I figured my job would be the least of my worries soon enough. I spent the morning preparing. Val Martinez had delivered a thick folder of evidence. Photographs of Calla and Trey at the motel, copies of credit card statements, documentation of the embezzlement scheme, and most damaging of all, printed emails between Calla and Trey discussing their exit strategy. The emails made for painful reading. They talked about me like I was an obstacle to be removed, a problem to be solved. Trey had suggested that the mental incompetence angle was their best bet for a clean separation that would leave Calla with custody of Riley and the majority of our assets. But the most recent emails revealed something else. Trey was getting impatient. He wanted Calla to file for separation immediately, and he was pressuring her to move faster on the therapy appointments and the mental health documentation. "We can't wait much longer," he'd written. "The audit is coming up next month, and I need to be clear of all complications before then." So he knew about the embezzlement investigation. He was trying to use my wife to cover his tracks, and when that was done, he'd probably throw her under the bus to save himself. I arranged the evidence on our dining room table like pieces of a puzzle, each document telling part of the story. Then I texted Calla, "Can you come home for lunch? We need to talk." She arrived 30 minutes later, looking nervous, but trying to hide it behind a bright smile. "This is unusual," she said, hanging up her coat. "Is everything okay?" "Come sit down," I said, gesturing to the dining room. She walked into the room and stopped when she saw the documents spread across the table. Her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, fear, and finally, resignation. "Drake," she said quietly. "Sit down, Calla." She sat across from me, her eyes scanning the evidence. I watched her face as she took it all in. The photos from the motel, the credit card statements, the emails, the insurance documents. "How long have you known?" she asked finally. "I started suspecting months ago. I've known for sure since last weekend." She nodded slowly, like she'd been expecting this moment. "What do you want?" "I want the truth. All of it." Calla was quiet for a long time, staring at the photos of herself and Trey. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. It started as just flirtation, office banter, you know? He was charming and funny, and he made me feel special, important. When? About 8 months ago, right after I got the promotion. He said he'd noticed my potential, that he wanted to mentor me, help me advance my career. And you believed him. I wanted to believe him. She looked up at me, and I saw tears in her eyes. Drake, I felt invisible. You were always at the mill, working overtime, coming home exhausted. Riley was busy with school and friends. I felt like I was disappearing, like nobody saw me anymore. So you decided to have an affair? It wasn't supposed to be an affair. It was just attention. Someone who listened to me, who made me feel attractive and interesting. But it escalated, and before I knew it, we were meeting outside of work, and then you were planning to leave me and take everything I've worked for. She flinched. That wasn't my idea. Trey said. He said you'd try to make things difficult, that you'd fight for custody and try to take the house. He said we needed to protect ourselves. By having me declared mentally incompetent. I never wanted to hurt you, Drake. I just wanted out. I wanted a chance to start over with someone who sees me, who appreciates me. I leaned forward. Calla, look at this. I showed her the documents Val had uncovered about Trey's embezzlement, his gambling debts, his financial problems. He's been using you, I said. The credit cards, the insurance policy, the access to company systems. He's setting you up to take the fall for his crimes. She read through the documents, her face growing paler with each page. This can't be right, she said. Trey wouldn't. He loves me. Trey loves your money and your access to company accounts. Look at the timeline, Calla. He started pursuing you right after you got promoted, right after you got access to the client management system. This was never about love. She stared at the evidence for a long time, and I could see her worldview crumbling. The man she'd thought loved her, the man she'd been willing to destroy our marriage for, had been using her from the beginning. What happens now? She asked. That depends on you. What do you mean? I took a deep breath. This was the moment that would determine everything, whether we tried to rebuild what was left of our marriage or whether we became enemies in a bitter separation. I'm willing to give you a choice, I said. You can end the affair, cooperate with the investigation into Trey's embezzlement, and we can try to work on our marriage. It won't be easy, and it won't be quick, but I'm willing to try if you are. And if I'm not? Then I give all of this evidence to your company's internal audit department, to Trey's wife, and to Riley. You face the consequences of your choices, and we get separated on my terms, not yours. Calla was quiet for a long time, staring at the photos of herself with Trey. Finally, she looked up at me. I need time to think. You have until tomorrow morning. She stood up slowly, like an old woman. Drake, I want you to know, I never meant for it to go this far. I never wanted to hurt you or Riley. But you did hurt us, Calla. The question now is whether you're going to make it worse or try to make it better. After she left, I sat at the dining room table, surrounded by the wreckage of my marriage. I thought about the woman I'd married 16 years ago, the woman who'd been my partner and my best friend. That woman was still there somewhere, buried under months of lies and bad decisions, but I wasn't sure if she was strong enough to fight her way back to the surface. My phone rang. It was Riley, calling from school. Dad, can I stay at Emma's house tonight? Her mom said it's okay. Sure, kiddo. Everything all right? Yeah, just the house feels weird lately, like everyone's pretending everything is normal when it's not. Smart kid. Too smart for her own good sometimes. I love you, Riley. Love you too, Dad. That evening, I sat in my garage with a beer and my phone, waiting for Calla to come home. She didn't. According to Find My Friends, she was at Trey's house across town. I wondered if she was telling him about our conversation, warning him that his crimes had been discovered, or maybe she was confronting him about the embezzlement, demanding to know if I was telling the truth about his motives. Either way, tomorrow I'd have my answer. Either Calla would choose our family, or she'd choose the man who'd been using her. But as I sat there in the dark, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and old wood, I realized something. I was okay either way. For months, I'd been afraid of losing my marriage, afraid of being alone, afraid of starting over at 38. But now, looking at everything clearly for the first time, I realized that I'd already lost my marriage. It had been over the moment Calla made her first choice to betray our vows. The only question now was whether we could build something new from the ashes, or whether we'd go our separate ways. Tomorrow, I'd find out which future was waiting for me. Calla didn't come home that night. At 6 a.m., I got a text. Staying at Trey's. We need to talk. Can you meet us at the office at 9? I stared at the message for a long time. She'd made her choice, and now she wanted to negotiate from a position she thought was stronger. She was about to learn how wrong she was. I forwarded the text to Val Martinez with a note. Game time. At 9 a.m. sharp, I walked into the Meridian Insurance building. This time, I wasn't alone. Val Martinez was with me, carrying a briefcase full of documentation. So was Pete Kowalski, who'd insisted on coming as moral support, and Madison Gannon, Trey's wife, who'd been very interested to learn about her husband's activities when Val had contacted her the night before. The receptionist looked confused when our group approached her desk. We're here to see Calla Torrin and Trey Gannon, I said. They're expecting us. I'll let them know you're here, she stammered, reaching for her phone. We didn't wait. I led our group directly to Trey's office, where Calla and Trey were sitting close together behind his desk, looking like they were prepared for battle. They weren't prepared for what walked through their door. Hello, Trey, Madison Gannon said, her voice ice cold. Surprised to see me? Trey's face went white. Madison, what are you doing here? Learning about my husband's double life, she replied, settling into a chair across from his desk. Please don't let us interrupt. I believe you wanted to negotiate. Calla looked back and forth between Madison and me, clearly realizing that the situation had spiraled far beyond her control. Drake, she said, this isn't what we discussed. You're right, I said. What we discussed was you ending the affair and cooperating with the embezzlement investigation. Instead, you spent the night with him, so now we're doing this the hard way. Val Martinez opened her briefcase and began laying documents on Trey's desk. Mr. Gannon, I'm a private investigator hired by Mr. Torrin. I have evidence of your affair with Mrs. Torrin, your embezzlement of company funds, and your plan to have Mr. Torrin declared mentally incompetent. I thought you might want to see what we're working with before we take this to your company's board of directors. Trey tried to maintain his composure, but I could see sweat beading on his forehead. I don't know what you think you found, but we found everything, Madison interrupted. The motel receipts, the credit card charges, the falsified expense reports, the unauthorized transfers. We found the emails where you discussed using Calla to access client accounts. We found your gambling debts and your plan to use her life insurance policy to pay them off. Calla turned to stare at Trey. Gambling debts? What gambling debts? It's not what it sounds like, Trey said quickly. I had a few bad investments, but I was going to pay everything back. With my money, Calla said, her voice rising. With my insurance policy. Calla, you have to understand. I was trying to protect us. I was trying to make sure we had a future together. By stealing from the company? By setting up my husband to look crazy? Val placed another document on the desk. Mrs. Torrin, this is a record of internet searches conducted on your work computer. Searches for information about involuntary commitment procedures, paranoid behavior symptoms, and asset protection during mental health crises. Your IT department keeps very detailed logs. Calla stared at the document, then at Trey. You told me to research those things. You said it was just in case Drake became violent during the separation. I was protecting you, Trey insisted. You were setting me up, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Just like you set up Drake. Just like you've been setting up everyone. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Pete Kowalski spoke up. Sounds like you folks have a lot to discuss, he said. But I think Drake's heard enough. He was right. I'd come here hoping for some kind of closure, some final confrontation that would make sense of the past 8 months. Instead, I was watching two people who'd betrayed me turn on each other, and it just made me tired. Calla, I said, do you want to try to save our marriage? She looked at me with tears in her eyes. Drake, I don't know if we can come back from this. That's not what I asked. Do you want to try? She was quiet for a long time. Finally, she shook her head. I think too much has happened. I think we've both said and done things that we can't take back. I nodded. It wasn't the answer I'd hoped for 8 months ago, but it was the answer I'd expected today. Okay then, I said. Val will be in touch with your lawyer about the separation agreement. Pete, Madison, let's go. As we reached the door, Trey called out. Drake, wait, we can work this out. We don't have to involve the company or the police. We can handle this privately. I turned back to him. You're right, we could handle this privately. But you made one mistake, Trey. What's that? You went after my daughter. You were planning to have me declared incompetent so you could take custody of my kid. That's not something I handle privately. I walked out of the office and didn't look back. In the elevator, Madison Gannon turned to me. What happens now? Now you and I file for separation from our respective spouses, I said. Val turns over the embezzlement evidence to the company and the district attorney, and we all try to rebuild our lives. "What about them?" Pete asked, nodding back toward the office. "They deserve each other," I said. But as the elevator descended toward the ground floor, I realized that wasn't quite true. Calla had made terrible choices, had betrayed our marriage and our family, but she'd also been manipulated by someone who saw her vulnerabilities and exploited them. Trey, on the other hand, had calculated every move, planned every betrayal, used everyone around him as tools to get what he wanted. They didn't deserve each other. Calla deserved a chance to learn from her mistakes and rebuild her life. Trey deserved whatever consequences were coming his way. As for me, I deserved better than both of them. Walking out of that building into the cold Cleveland morning, flanked by the people who'd stood by me when everything fell apart, I realized something. I was going to be okay. It would take time to rebuild, time to heal, time to figure out how to be a single father and how to help Riley navigate this new reality. But I was stronger than I'd given myself credit for, smarter than Calla and Trey had assumed, and surrounded by people who actually cared about me. The blue dot had stopped moving that Tuesday afternoon, and my marriage had ended. But my life, my real life, was just beginning. 3 months later, the separation was final. Trey was facing embezzlement charges and had been fired from Meridian Insurance. Calla had found a new job in another city and was slowly rebuilding her relationship with Riley. As for me, I was exactly where I wanted to be, home with my daughter, planning our future together, and finally free from the weight of lies I'd been carrying for too long. The dot had stopped moving, but I was moving forward, and that made all the difference.